Now similarly for the intermediate spreadsheet, we'd first name the spreadsheet. Sheet 1 is basic, and double clicking on sheet 2 and renaming it to intermediate, starting with cell B2, giving it a heading by selecting a certain number of cells, clicking merge in center, and giving raw data. Now we'll be giving raw data for a car, however you find on a website. Let's say I have certain cars which I'll copy paste from my basic spreadsheet. Click Ctrl C and clicking Ctrl V for pasting into my intermediate spreadsheet. Now I can put in some headers like horsepower, weight in pounds, power to weight ratio, miles per gallon in city, miles per gallon on highway, average miles per gallon, drive, all-wheel drive or front-wheel drive, and then passenger capacity, real legroom, boot space, safety, and a total price for the car, increasing the column width, so that the text in each of the cells is clearly visible and does not overlap. Now we can format it as a table, selecting the cells, formatting it as a table, and it has headers, clicking OK. Now we won't be needing filters for this table. Putting all the text in the center. Now I can put in the sample values for horsepower. Now I can put in similar values by looking at a sample data from any website and just put in the values for horsepower, weight, miles per gallon city. Now this is just sample data. There's no formula or anything involved. Just copying some formula and writing it down. Drive, all-wheel or front-wheel, passenger capacity, rear legroom, boot space, safety from 5 out of 5, and the total price, whichever was available online for each of those cars. Now putting the price as in the units of currency, US dollars. Now the power to weight ratio can be calculated using equals horsepower divided by the weight, which is C4 by D4. All the values get populated automatically in the table. Now I can move it to 2 decimal places number and putting it to decimal places 2 with the given sample, but the 2 decimal places actually don't have much variation, so we'll be moving it to more number of decimal places so that we see distinction among the values. Let's say we move it to 5 decimal places. Now we see different values like 0.5263. Similarly for average miles per gallon, Now this would be miles per gallon city plus miles per gallon highway, and divide that by 2. So the values get populated. Now we'll be creating another table for normalized data, selecting the cells, putting in normalized data as the heading, and copying the cars because the cars and the parameters would remain the same. Click Ctrl C and Ctrl V. Similarly for cars, I select the cars, hit Ctrl C on the keyboard, and then Ctrl V where I want to paste it, and deselect this selected cars using the escape key. Now I can format this normalized data as a table. It has headers. In this one, we'll be needing the filter button so that we can actually see only those cars which have, let's say, certain miles per gallon or certain horsepower, just for representational purposes. Now for horsepower, we need to normalize the data. Now I'll select the horsepower for Chevrolet Malibu, divide it by $4. Now I need to keep one value constant for each of the cars. So $sign is used to keep one cell constant, and multiplying it by 100 so that it gives a value not in points. It gives me values varying near about 100. So it populates the whole column for each of the cars. Now similarly for the weight, I need to calculate the weight for Chevrolet Malibu and keep the weight of Chevrolet Malibu constant for each of the cars so that the normalized data would have respective values. The values would be actually relative to Chevrolet Malibu. Similarly for power to weight ratio, E4 by E$4, because we're keeping power to weight ratio of Chevrolet Malibu constant. This is just to normalize the data. Similarly for miles per gallon city. Now I can actually use the bottom right option of copying the formula for the remaining parameters by using this bottom right option and dragging it. So the miles per gallon highway, the formula gets automatically copied according to the current cell, H4 by H$4. Now the value for drive is it's not actually in points, so we'll just delete it because the values are in alphabet, so we'll just copy paste them. And similarly for passenger capacity, the values are the same for each car, so we'll just copy paste them. If we don't, we'll just see 100 for each of them. Now for legroom, we have the same formula. Similarly for safety. Now to enter the values for each of the cars, we'll use a shortcut wherein we double click on the plus sign, the bottom right of one cell, and it automatically fills in the cells of the remaining cars. Double click and we have the values. Double click the plus sign on the bottom right of a cell and it gives the values. Similarly for boot space and safety. Now we need to copy the formula for total price, but the higher the total price of a car, actually the lower the total price of a car, the better it is for the consumer. So what we need to do is we need to find the lowest value and put it as the best. So for Chevrolet Malibu, we'll actually need to inverse the values of the total price. So what we'll do is we'll find the lowest value of lowest total price, which is $18,095 for Mazda 3. And then since we're inversing the total price, because the higher it is, the worse it is for the consumer, and the lower it is, the better it is for the consumer. So we'll 1 divided by N12, which is Mazda 3. But in actuality, we are calculating the total price for Chevrolet Malibu. So we just need to keep the denominator constant, that is the lowest price. So we'll do N4 divided by N12, $12, to keep the lowest price as the constant for normalizing the data. And multiplying by 100. So this gives us Mazda 3 as the best car just according to price, because it has the lowest price parameter, total price. Now we can put in the values as a number, so that we have 2 decimal places. And similarly for these, we have 2 decimal places. I can put the text in the center. Now I have another table, relative importance by criteria, wherein we set the criteria for each of the cars and get the ranking accordingly. Got shifted, so let me Control Z. I press Control Z to put it back where it was. Now put in the measure and the weight. I put in the parameters which are important to me and put in the weights. Now let's say I weigh power to weight ratio. I need a measure of average fuel economy to be important. Rear legroom to be important as one of my deciding factors in buying a car. The overall safety rating. And the price to give me the total. Now I give them weights in percentage. I give 30% to power to weight ratio, 10 to average fuel economy, 35 to rear legroom, 15 to average overall safety rating, and 10 to price. Increasing the size of the width, increasing the width of the column. Now putting it in percentage, but this gives us actually 3000. So what we need to do is we can either put the cell format as percentage first and then put in the values, or just put in the re-putting the values just like I did right now. Now the total would be the sum of the above weights, which is from C33 to C37, putting the sum formula to give the total as 100%. We have formatted it as a table, and we don't need any filters. Putting the center in the center, putting the text in the center. Now giving a heading of the results table. Wherein I put in the parameters which I decided important, like the measures of power to weight ratio, average fuel economy, rear legroom, overall safety rating, the price, and finally the total score to give us the rank. Putting the heading according to the table, selecting table rank and merging and centering. Increasing the width of the column so that we see power to weight ratio in the cell clearly. Similarly for average fuel economy column. Now we have car and weight in the row and car in the column. So we have Chrysler. We can just copy and paste the values from the above table. The cars, we have Control C, select the column and pasting it. And Honda Civic was bold from the previous table, so reversing the change. Now formatting this as a table. And removing the form filter button. Putting the text in the center. Now adding a particular shape to signify which represents a car and which represents the weight. So I'll select this signify one, and I rotate it according to myself. Put it here, decrease the size just to signify that cars are in the column and weights are in the row. Putting in the power to weight ratio, this is 30%. So first I select them and put them as percentage and put in the values: 30%, 10%, 35%, 15%, 10%, and putting in this total score sum, which is equals sum, and selecting the cells F33 to J33, giving us the sum, which is 100%. Now for the results, we'll keep the power to weight ratio of 30% constant, that is selecting the cell and putting F$33 because we need 30% constant for each car, as the power to weight ratio has been decided as 30%, the weightage of that. Multiplying it by the power to weight ratio normalized data, which is E18. And I can do it similarly for each car by using the shortcut of double clicking the bottom right cell. Now similarly for average fuel economy, I need to keep G33, that is 10% fuel economy, as constant, and looking up average fuel economy or average miles per gallon in normalized data and multiplying it by the average fuel economy in the results table to give us the values. Similarly for legroom, keeping 35% as constant, H $33 multiplied by looking up rear legroom in normalized data, multiplying it for this Chevrolet Malibu, same is the formula for overall safety rating, keeping I-33 as constant, so I $33, and looking up safety rating for one car in normalized data, and using the shortcut to fill in the data for all these cars. Similarly for price, keeping 10% as constant for each car and multiplying it by normalized data, and 18 total price, and into 100. Well, actually we don't need to do that in multiplied by 100, so I'll just remove it from the formula column and press enter, and putting it for each of the cells of each car. Now this is giving us incorrect values because the sum has been copied as percentage. The sum has been copied in percentage from the total score, the first. So what we need to do is we need to remove the percentage to give the total score of each car, putting it in number so that we have 2 decimal digits. Now we don't have a rank for the first one. Now to calculate the rank, we'll use the rank formula, equals rank, open parentheses, selecting the first car, total score, K34, and it's given reference order. So we need to select the reference order of, that is selecting all the cars. Now for giving the rank, the reference order for all the cars would remain the same. So we'll keep them as constant, K $34 to K $44, 34 to 44. So it gives us the rank. Now the first one has no rank. We'll put a tilde, and we see that Nissan Maxima has the first rank according to the set parameters. Now we can change the values in any of those set parameters, weighted parameters. Now we can put in, we haven't mapped the values, so we can just select them. Dragging and dropping won't actually work because C33, the mapping is done row wise and not column wise. We're mapping columns to rows. So we have D33 and this is C33, where in fact we need C32 and C33, C34. So mapping cannot be done column versus rows. It has to be column versus column or row versus row. So we'll just map values from and put in each of the values of decided factors, decided weights, equals C36 and price as C37, and the total score already has a formula, so we don't need to map it. Now we can change the values, we can change the weights. If I plan to give legroom a lesser weight, then the values get automatically changed in the results table. Let's say I give price a bigger priority and give legroom a lower priority. So we see Honda Civic has now been ranked 1. We'll just format this. give the headings a format, move this to the center. We can actually copy the format and use the format painter and paste it. Now the format for this is different because the number of rows and columns selected are different. So we'll have to do the custom formatting, and similar for this. Relative importance by criteria. 14 text size.